Today I'm going to tell you one of the scariest stories from my childhood. The story of Harold. Our story begins in the early 1900s when two brothers worked as farmers on some land they owned. Work was fairly easy. The men would tend to their cows, work in the garden, and sleep, and that was pretty much it. The only problem with that was they were bored. They were unmarried and they didn't really have much to do other than work. They were bored out of their minds. Now every year whenever it would get hot outside, the two guys would take their cows to a pasture out above the valley where it would be cool in the summertime. They'd live there for a couple of months and then they would move back to their tiny house. One night while eating dinner out of pure boredom, one of the brothers suggested that they build a doll. A doll the size of a man that they could use as a scarecrow to keep the birds away. The older brother Alfred agreed to this out of pure boredom, but he decided that he wanted to make the doll look like Harold, a farmer that lived down the street that both of the farmers hated, strictly because his crops were just way better than theirs was. So they took some old cloth and some clothes and they stuffed it with hay and created a new scarecrow they named Harold. They even made this doll look as much like Harold as they could. They gave him a pointy nose, long nasty hair, and tiny eyes that looked just like his, as well as a curling frown. Every morning they would carry Harold out into the pasture and tie him to a pole in the garden. And every night they would bring him inside to keep him from getting ruined by the rain. Whenever something would go wrong around the farm, they would take it out on Harold. They would beat him, smear food on his face, humiliate him, cuss him out, just pretty much anything that you could think of they did to this doll. One night after Thomas covered Harold's face in food, Harold grunted. But Alfred liked having Harold around, so he protested. They reached the agreement that they would soon be on their way to the pasture outside of the valley, and once they decided to leave, they would just leave Harold there by himself. So, they threw Harold in a corner and they left him alone for a couple days. For the most part of these couple of days, Harold kept still, didn't make a sound. But every now and then he would grunt lightly, or he would move ever so slightly, almost to the point where you weren't even sure if he was moving. So before long, they decided that it was probably just a mouse that climbed up inside of Harold, or maybe even a bug, and they soon went back to their old ways. They would use Harold as a scarecrow for the day, and they would use him as a punching bag during the night. Until one night when Alfred was staring at Harold and he noticed something. Harold was growing. This was enough for the two farmers, so they decided, tomorrow we're leaving for the pasture, and Harold is staying here. They hardly got any sleep that night, and the next morning while they were eating breakfast, Harold got up and walked out of the house on his own. This understandably freaked out the farmers, so they got up and they locked all the doors and windows. They then saw Harold climbing up the side of their house and onto their roof, where for a whole day and a whole night he trotted around like a horse on its hind legs. At dawn the following day, he climbed down from the roof and went to the back corner of the pasture, where he stood completely still for a whole day. And the entire time he was in that back corner, the two men took turns watching him, waiting for him to make his next move. The next morning, Harold was nowhere to be seen, so the two men grabbed all their stuff, grabbed their cows, and made a run for it, using this as their portal for escape. After they made it about a mile down the road, they realized something. They forgot the milking stools. And neither of them wanted to go back by themselves to pick up the stools, but at the same time, it would have been way too expensive to replace the two stools. So, the two decided to draw straws, and Thomas drew the short end of the straw. Alfred had to hype him up, telling him that a doll really couldn't do anything to him to hurt him, and well, they didn't see him whenever they left, so it's very possible that he had already left. So Thomas told his brother he'd catch up with him later and made his way back towards the house. And Alfred made his way towards the new prairie. A little while later, Alfred came across an opening and turned around to look back at the old house. He was looking for Thomas, but he couldn't see him. Instead, he saw Harold, looking at him as if he had been waiting for him to walk by. Harold was standing on top of the roof again. As he knew he had Alfred's attention, he knelt down to lift something up and hang out to dry. And what it was a bloodied skin, and Thomas was never seen again. Yeah, this story actually used to keep me up at night. I love the whole series of scary stories to tell in the dark. It actually, how did they think that that was appropriate for kids? They still scare me. But yeah, leave a comment if you read these stories when you were a kid and if they scared you or if they still scare you. Maybe since I'm trying to get back into the swing of things, I'll use videos like this as a little bit of a filler to help me get from video to video. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, guys, don't forget to be nice to each other.